You wake up and go outside, and London is still there. Mostly. The street has glass on it. Not your windows. Yours are intact, which is the first thing you check. The way everyone checks first thing, before anything else. The specific relief of your own glass still in its frame. 2 doors down is a different story. The front window's gone, the curtains moving in the October air through the empty frames, the glass across the pavement catching the morning light in a way that would be almost beautiful if you didn't know what it meant. Around the corner, smoke is still rising. A fire crew is working something that burned last night and is now in its final stage, the orange gone, just the gray column going up into the pale morning sky. A man in a tin helmet is standing at the end of the street, making notes in a small book, with the focused attention of someone who has been making these notes every morning for a month and has developed a system. The postman is on his rounds. This is the central fact of the London Blitz, the thing that the Luftwaffe's planners did not put in their calculations. Every morning, the city assesses what happened last night and then gets on with the day. Not because it isn't frightened, not because it isn't grieving, because getting on is the option that is available. And London in October 1940 has decided, collectively and without a formal vote, that it is going to take that option every single morning until this ends. It is October 1940. The Blitz has been running for a month. London bombed every night since September 7th without exception. 13,000 Londoners are already dead. The Luftwaffe is putting 200 to 300 bombers over the city on most nights, guided by the fires from the night before, dropping high explosives and incendiaries across the East End, the docks, the city, the residential streets of Stepney and Bermondsey and Lambeth and Islington. The government has not collapsed. The BBC is broadcasting. The RAF is still in the air. The buses are mostly running. The postman is on his rounds. Let's go out. The first hour of a Blitz morning has a specific texture that becomes familiar after a month, a ritual of assessment and response that the city performs every day with increasing efficiency. The ARP Warden's overnight report is posted at the corner, a handwritten summary of what happened in this sector. Incidents attended, addresses affected, casualties reported, unexploded bombs noted with their locations, so that nobody walks into one on the way to work. You read it the way you'd read a local notice, which is what it is, the neighborhood communicating with itself about what the night produced. 2 streets over, there is a gap. A terraced house that was there on Tuesday is not there on Wednesday. What remains is the houses on either side, their party walls now exposed, the wallpaper of the interior rooms visible from the street, a bedroom wall with a floral pattern and a picture still hanging on it, the picture slightly tilted, undisturbed by the fact that the room it belongs to no longer has an outer wall. This image, the wallpaper and the hanging picture, is so common in Blitz London that it stops being shocking within the first week and becomes instead a kind of urban grammar, a symbol that the street reads as, "There was a house here last night. It is not here now. We are noting this and continuing. The family who lived there is with a neighbor 3 doors down. This is how it works." The network of the street absorbs the displaced with a speed and a naturalness that surprises people who experience it for the first time and stops surprising people who have been living it for a month. A spare room, a sofa, a camp bed in the kitchen. The WVS, the Women's Voluntary Service, is already on the street with their mobile canteen, a large urn of tea on a trolley, sandwiches in a tin, 2 women in green uniforms serving them to the fire crew and the family from the Gap and anyone else who is standing in the street at 8 in the morning with the expression that means last night was a bad one. The tea is not a joke, and it is not a cliché. It is a genuine logistical and psychological response to a specific problem, which is that people who have spent the night in a shelter, or under the stairs, or listening to bombing from their beds, emerge into the morning cold and shaken and in need of something warm and ordinary. Tea is warm and ordinary. It costs almost nothing to provide at scale. The WVS understands this and is on the street every morning with it, and the people who take the cup and wrap their hands around it and stand in the street drinking it are doing something that is simultaneously trivial and essential. You take a cup, it is very strong and slightly too sweet, and it is exactly right. The number 15 bus is running a diverted route this morning because there is a bomb crater on Bishopsgate that hasn't been assessed yet, and may or may not be concealing an unexploded device beneath it, which means the street is closed and will stay closed until the bomb disposal unit gets to it, which given the current volume of unexploded bombs across the city could be today or could be next week. The conductor explains this diversion at each stop with the tone of a man who has explained it 6 times already this morning and expects to explain it 6 more times before his shift ends and has made his peace with this. A woman at the front of the bus asks if it's safe to go past the end of her road, and the conductor says he expects so, and she nods, and they leave it at that, which is the kind of exchange that passes for reassurance in a city that has stopped pretending certainty is available. The market is running. Not fully. Half the stalls aren't here today, vendors who didn't come in or whose supplies didn't get through or who took a direct hit last night and are dealing with that. But the other half are here, their produce laid out, their voices doing what market voices do, and the people who are buying with the focused attention of people for whom this is Tuesday's shopping regardless of what Tuesday brought with it. A greengrocer has a hand-lettered sign on his stall. Same prices as yesterday. This requires explanation because in the first weeks of the Blitz, some traders raised prices on basic goods, and the response from the neighborhood was swift and lasting, and the traders who did it are still living with the Blitz consequences. The sign is a statement of position. The man behind it does not look like someone making a heroic gesture. He looks like someone selling turnips, which is what he is doing, and the sign is just information. On a side street off the main road, a shop has taken blast damage to its front window. The owner has boarded it with plywood and written on the plywood in large black letters, "More open than usual." The sign has been photographed by a journalist and will appear in a newspaper and eventually in histories of the Blitz as an example of something, of the spirit, of the attitude, of the thing that London produces under pressure that is genuinely remarkable and also genuinely English in its specific flavor of stubbornness expressed as mild sarcasm. You walk past it and into the office where you work and take off your coat and sit down and then put your coat back on because 2 windows are missing and the October air is coming through and the coal allocation for the building doesn't cover heating a room that is open to the street. You work in your coat. Everyone works in their coat. Nobody remarks on this. The pub opens at noon, and you go at noon because the pub is where London is right now, where it has always been when things get difficult, where the information is, and the rumor is, and the human warmth is, and the particular dark comedy that the English develop under pressure as a survival mechanism and a form of armor. The Lamb and Flag, or whatever this one is called, has its windows intact, and its dartboard in use, and its barmaid behind the bar, with the expression of a woman who has heard everything produced by a month of nightly bombing, and has filed all of it under, yes, and what will you have? The beer is not what it was. Wartime rationing has touched the brewing industry, and what comes out of the tap is thinner and weaker than the pre-war version and costs more, which is a combination that produces strong feelings among the regulars, an ongoing commentary that is itself a form of community, the shared complaint functioning as social glue. At the bar, 2 men are discussing last night with the specificity of people comparing notes on a shared experience. One of them has a theory about where the bombers were coming from, based on the sound of the engines, a theory that is almost certainly wrong but is detailed and confident, and is being received with the respectful attention you give a man who was up all night listening to the sky. A woman at a table near the window is reading a newspaper with complete concentration, the newspaper held at an angle that suggests she has been in here since the pub opened and intends to stay until it becomes useful to leave. In the corner, the radio. The BBC, which has been broadcasting through the bombing with a consistency that has become one of the psychological pillars of the Blitz. The voice on the radio, a proof that the city is still functioning, that the institution is still there. that something continues regardless of what happened last night. The news comes on and the pub goes slightly quieter without anyone suggesting it should. The news is not good and is not presented as good. This is something the BBC understands better than the German propaganda ministry will ever understand about its own broadcasts. People who are being bombed every night can tell when they are being lied to, and the moment they decide the information they're receiving is managed is the moment it stops working. The BBC tells the truth, carefully and within the constraints of what can be said without helping the enemy, and London trusts it for exactly that reason. Someone at the bar makes a joke about the bombing. It is a dark joke, the kind that only works if everyone in the room has been through the same thing, and everyone in the room has, and it works. The laughter is real. If this is how you like to spend your time, subscribe. New city, new year, every week. His name is probably Arthur, or Bill, or Ted. He is in his 50s, too old for the military, with a day job in an office or a shop that he has been doing for 20 years and will do for 20 more, and in the evenings and through the nights he is an air raid precautions warden, a civilian volunteer in a tin helmet and a dark blue uniform with a white W on the armband, responsible for a specific sector of streets that he knows as well as he knows his own face. His job has several components. The most famous one, the one that appears in every account of the Blitz and every film made about it, is the blackout enforcement. Put that light out. The blackout is total in London. Every window covered, every street lamp extinguished, every car headlight masked to a slit, and it is the ARP warden's job to ensure compliance, walking his sector after dark looking for the line of light under a door or the glow from an insufficiently covered window, and knocking and telling whoever opens the door that they need to sort that out in a tone that varies by warden from polite request to prosecutorial. And the relationship between London and its wardens on the subject of the blackout is one of the textures of the Blitz, simultaneously grateful and irritated, the way you are about anyone doing a necessary job you're glad someone else is doing. But the blackout is the least of it. He is also the first person on the scene when something goes wrong. When a house takes a hit in his sector, he is there before the heavy rescue team, assessing the damage, listening for voices in the rubble, maintaining the perimeter, directing people away from the unexploded device he thinks may be in the crater at the end of the garden. He is not trained for any of this in any serious way. He has had a course and he has the manual, and he has a month of nights that have taught him more than either. He does his afternoon rounds now, before dark, checking on the addresses that had incidents last night, talking to the families, noting what needs to be followed up. He stops at the gap in the terrace and stands in front of it for a moment. He knew the family. Of course he knew the family. He knows everyone in his sector. He writes something in his book and moves on. At the end of the street, he stops to talk to a woman who is sweeping glass from her front step. And the conversation they have is about the glass and about her daughter who is evacuated to the countryside, and about whether she thinks she made the right decision sending her, and about the bombing last night, and about what he thinks is going to happen. And what he says is something careful and neither optimistic nor pessimistic. Something that acknowledges what is happening without predicting what comes next. And she nods and goes back to sweeping, and he goes on his rounds. Before the sirens, London prepares. The Anderson shelter in the back garden is a corrugated steel arch, half buried in the earth. Its interior roughly the size of a large wardrobe, its floor perpetually damp, its walls running with condensation, its ceiling low enough that a standing adult has to duck. The government distributed 1.5 million of them to households with gardens before the war, free to anyone earning under £250 a year. They are not comfortable. They are genuinely effective against anything except a direct hit, and a direct hit is survivable almost nowhere, so the Anderson shelter is as good as it gets for most of the city. You bring a blanket and a thermos and a book you won't be able to concentrate on, and you get in before the sirens, because getting in after the sirens means moving in the dark in the blackout, and you have learned through experience that this is worse. But tonight you are going to the tube. The government tried, initially, to prevent Londoners from using the underground stations as shelters. on the grounds that it would interfere with operations and create a civilian dependency on underground spaces that would be difficult to manage. London ignored this. Londoners bought platform tickets for a penny and went down and stayed. And the government, understanding that fighting this battle was not the battle it needed to be fighting, relented and organized the situation it could not prevent. By October 1940, 177,000 people are sleeping in the underground every night. You go down at Aldwych, which is one of the stations that has been taken entirely out of service for use as a shelter, and the platform is already filling. Blankets and pillows and the particular improvised domesticity of people who have been doing this for a month and have developed systems. A family has their spot marked with a chalk line on the platform edge, a practice that has become standardized enough that there is now an unofficial allocation system, the long-term residents of a particular stretch of platform having a claim that newcomers respect, because everyone understands that the system only works if it is respected. The children are the surprise of the tube shelter. Some of them are frightened, and some of them are asleep, and some of them have decided that sleeping on a tube platform is an adventure that they will be talking about in 50 years, which they will be, and the ones who have made that decision are the easiest to be around. A boy of about 8 is playing cards with a man who might be his grandfather, their game proceeding with great seriousness on the platform floor between two blankets, the cards dog-eared from nights of use. An elderly woman 3 spots down from you produces a thermos and 2 cups and pours tea for herself and for the woman next to her without a word being exchanged, the gesture so natural and so automatic that it is clearly not the first time it has happened, that this small ritual of the thermos has become part of how these two people manage the nights. They have been neighbors in this street for 40 years and have never spoken much until September, and now know more about each other than many people know about their closest friends. The lights on the platform are kept low after a certain hour. The sound of the station, the echoes, the trains that still run on other lines sending vibrations through the tunnels is a constant background. People are reading and talking and sleeping and lying awake staring at the curved ceiling, and the overall effect is not unlike being on a very long, stationary, underground train journey with everyone you know. The sirens go at 7 minutes past 8. You know the sound. Everyone in London knows the sound now, the rising and falling wail that the government practiced and tested before the war, and that the population heard for the first time on September 3rd, 1939, and has been hearing intermittently since, and nightly since September, and has learned to process in the specific way you learn to process something that is simultaneously alarming and routine. The body still responds. The stomach still tightens. But the feet know what to do without being told, moving toward the shelter, following the route that has been walked so many times in the past month that it happens without conscious navigation. On the platform, the conversation drops but does not stop. Then the anti-aircraft guns start. The closest battery is perhaps half a mile away, and when it fires, the sound is physical, a concussive thud that you feel in the chest before you hear with the ears, and it keeps firing irregular intervals, the guns tracking the bombers that are now audible as well, the specific desynchronized engine note that London has learned to identify, the Heinkel and the Dornier, their engines deliberately out of sync to confuse the sound locators, the German engineers having solved a problem that the sound of the engines created by creating a sound that is itself now identifiable. The bombs fall somewhere to the east. You know it is the east, because the sounds from that direction are different in quality from the anti-aircraft fire. A heavier impact, felt through the platform floor rather than through the air, and then the glow that becomes visible even underground in a certain way, a change in the quality of the dim light coming down the escalators from the street above, a warmer tone, the light of fire. On the platform, a woman is singing quietly, not performing, not trying to rally anyone, just singing to herself or to the child against her shoulder, something low and familiar, and the people immediately around her have gone slightly quiet in response, not stopping their own conversations, but attenuating them, the singing becoming a background presence that changes the quality of the shelter in a way that is difficult to describe and obvious to everyone in it. This is what the Blitz produces, alongside the death and the damage and the grief. It produces this: strangers on a tube platform at 9:30 at night, the bombs falling somewhere to the east, the guns going, a woman singing to her child, an old man and a boy playing cards, the thermos being passed, the conversation continuing, this specific texture of human life maintaining itself in the available spaces, finding the room to be ordinary in the middle of the extraordinary. It is not heroism. It is more durable than heroism. It is just people deciding that this is not going to be the thing that stops them being people. The Blitz ends in May 1941 when Hitler turns his attention east toward the Soviet Union, toward Stalingrad and everything that comes with it. London survives. 43,000 British civilians are killed in the Blitz. More than 1 million London homes are damaged or destroyed. The East End, the docks, the City of London, large portions of Southwark and Lambeth and Stepney, and the quiet residential streets of 100 neighborhoods are damaged or gone. The damage takes decades to fully repair. The prefabricated houses built in bombed lots still visible in parts of London into the 1980s, the gaps in Victorian terraces telling their story to anyone who knows what they're looking at. What the Luftwaffe's planners believed, and what their own doctrine told them, was that sustained bombing of a civilian population would produce social collapse. That the destruction of housing and infrastructure and the relentless pressure of nightly raids would break the will of the population and force the British government to negotiate. Hermann Göring promised Hitler that the RAF could be defeated from the air and Britain brought to terms. He was wrong on both counts. What they didn't understand, what the doctrine didn't account for, was the specific social response that the bombing produced. The community in the tube stations, the WVS on the street every morning with the tea urn, the ARP warden who knew every family in his sector by name, the more open than usual sign on the boarded-up shop front, the singing on the platform. These are not incidental details of the Blitz. They are its central fact. The bombing was supposed to isolate people, to make each family's experience of destruction private and overwhelming. What it did instead was create the conditions for a collective experience of survival that pulled people toward each other rather than apart. Churchill understood this and used it. His visits to the bombed streets, the tin hat, the cigar, the V sign, the "we can take it" rhetoric, all of it worked because it was articulating something that was already happening in the streets, not manufacturing it from nothing. The resilience was real. The political use of it was real. Both things are true. The myth of the Blitz spirit has been used, in the decades since, to paper over things it should not cover, to suggest that Britain is uniquely capable of hardship, to avoid conversations about class and race and who actually bore the weight of the bombing and who escaped it. The evacuation of children sent working-class London children to the countryside, where some were welcomed and some were not. The public shelters in wealthy areas were better than the public shelters in poor ones. The tube stations that became shelter communities were mostly in the center. The East End, which absorbed the heaviest bombing, had fewer resources and less political representation, and bore more of the cost. The myth flattens this. The reality doesn't. But the woman singing on the platform is real. The postman on his rounds is real. The cup of tea at 8 in the morning on a street with glass on it, the hands wrapped around the warm cup, the breath visible in the cold air, the fire crew packing up around the corner, and the school run starting, and the number 15 on its diverted route, and the city, imperfect and damaged and continuing, is real. The Blitz does not end in triumph. It ends because Hitler looks east, and London is, for the moment, no longer the priority. The bombers stop coming, and London wakes up one morning to a quiet it barely trusts, waiting for the sirens to start again, and they don't. And slowly the city understands that this particular chapter has closed and begins the long work of counting what it cost. The tube stations go back to being tube stations. The Anderson shelters rust in the gardens. The postman is on his rounds. If this video gave you something, share it with one person who you think should see it. That is what grows this channel, and it matters more with a video like this one than with most. Subscribe so you don't miss the next city. Leave a comment if you have thoughts. We read them. We'll see you there.